about music. You will be inspired to think higher, realize your gift. Join the music and Michelle and Gina. Turn us up and through your speakers is the music of music.
We are the Muses Behind the Music, and I am your host, Michelle Fowlin. Thank you to all of the Muses out there who have joined us this evening for our second edition with my brother, actor, psychologist, Dr. Mykee Michael Fowlin. Y'all, he was not named Mykee, but that name affectionately came about. I don't even know how. He's going to have to share that. I can't remember. I'm sure I know the story, but I just can't remember. If you all had missed the conversation that we had during season number 1, you can feel free to go on the YouTube channel and check it out, because there were so many great golden nuggets that Mike shared with us all. So many metaphoric examples between the rocks and the water and life, and just some beautiful takeaways that each person can gain from it. I want us to know that it's going to be the same thing this evening in our conversation. I put up the notice because we are going to be talking about areas in life that are challenges for oh so very many of us, and they're sensitive subject matters. And what I don't want to do is be offensive, or I don't want us to be triggered. And I just want us to feel like we are all in a safe space where we can have these conversations that are ever so needed. They're very important, especially coming out of a pandemic and needing to have a variety of tools and people to talk to work through what it was like to be removed from the connection of people for a good year and a half. And then all of those things that had developed over that course of time. I'm just excited for us to jump into the conversation. But for those of us who do not know my brother, who is a comedian, he is my best friend. He is really a humanitarian for justice, for peace, for love. Just a great-hearted individual. I want to share a little bit of what he did at a particular school, and I believe that the school is in New Jersey, and what people had to say about Dr. Mykee.
Dr. Mykee Fowlin's presentation asks the students to reflect on preconceived notions from their childhood. He uses a lot of humor and forms of entertainment that connect with his audience. Overall, he wants every student to understand that they are capable of changing the world for the good, but they must start from within. Every Seneca freshman was given a chance to view Dr. Fowlin in this performance. Treating others and yourself with respect is a simple yet profound step required to bringing out the good in all situations.
I would love for you all to welcome my brother, actor, psychologist, Dr. Mykee Fowlin.
Boom. All right.
Hey, Mykee, the man.
That's right. Mykee the man.
I'm so glad to have you back on the show with us. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no doubt.
Hey,
Love
listen, I was listening to the video, and I want to know right away, what's your story? Who are you?
The complexities of my experiences. You know, it's funny. I was just today meeting with a couple of guys who are working on a new program, and I have a couple of projects that are simultaneous projects. And so we were talking about those foundational stories that really affect you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
In ways that you're not thinking at the time. And I'll share this. Like, so when I was 8 years old, and you may not remember this because you were 6. And so I was 8 and we were living in Waltham. And it was a day when Thurman Munson, the Yankees catcher, he had died in a plane crash. And I had heard the news about this, and it was it's August 2nd, right, of when I was 8 years old. And I'd heard the news about this, and he was one of my favorite players. And it was the first experience of death that was real to me. You know, grandma died, you know, dad's mom had died the year before, but maybe I was just like 7 years old, couldn't process it the same way. But 8 years old, I was like, wow, he's never coming back. He's not playing again. And I'd gotten out of the shower, and I heard Roy, our brother, and this next door neighbor, Rosemary, that they were coming inside to tell me about the news. And they were like, Mike. And I was like naked. So I was like, oh, no. So 8 years old, I'm like running I run underneath the bed. I'm hiding. I'm just like, no. They think I'm playing hide and seek. So they're looking all around the house like, well, Mike, where are you? And then they go into the room and they both look under the bed and I'm naked. And I just go, ah! I start screaming. I am bawling, crying.
Are you serious?
Oh my goodness. Michelle, I was so upset that Rosemary saw me naked. It's the last time I've ever cried because of that. You know, and I was really sorry. I got jokes.
Yeah, okay.
But that story honestly affected me in other ways, just like, but the comfort of body, you know, and growing into that part, you know, and feel, because I was shamed by that story because, you know, after like Roy told mom and then mom told Aunt Noreen and her family. So we'd be at family gatherings, be like, Mykee, you still crying because I saw you naked? You know, and I was just humiliated.
Right.
And so, but that story though, when a few things happened. One was that death was real to me.
Yeah.
I became fascinated by death and thinking about it. But the other part of it too was this idea of our own nakedness. And so whether I'm talking about the physical nakedness or the nakedness of taking down our masks and the layers that we put up, you know, that I'm not going to cry about the real authentic self that I am, you know, that part of me. And so in answering the question of like, who am I? I am that person that has worked hard to strip down those masks and layers of clothes to try to be more real. And it's not like, for me, it's even though people think it's easy for me, it's not. Like, I'm still battling those parts of where I'm guarded because I don't want people to see my vulnerability.
Yeah. The fascination of death, can you expound on that a little bit? What fascinates you about it? The unknown, what elements?
Yeah, I think just that the seeming finality or mystery of it.
Mm.
The finality, at least a part of being on this earth, but the mystery of it definitely plays a role. But also, like, we grew up with dad, right? So there's these.
First of all, why you say it like that?
Well, I say it like that because I was like probably 9, 10, when dad would come into the room and he'd be upset about something, life stressors, and he would say things like, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be here on the planet, but if the Lord chooses to take me.
Y'all gotta know this is so real. We were hearing this stuff since we were little, y'all.
I'm telling you, so I used to
Since we were
cry when he
little.
used to say
Yeah.
that. I used to feel afraid that mom and dad are going to die.
Mhm.
And then it was just like he kept on saying it.
Yeah.
So then I was just like, so what it turned into was almost a layer where I wasn't afraid of it as the same way, but I certainly was fascinated by it. Like, what is it that this part that we all have to experience, regardless of what we do here on the planet, regardless of how famous or not famous we are, rich or poor we are, that we all have to go through that same process.
All of there.
That
Yeah,
humbles us.
oh, most definitely. I was sharing with you, and Facebook family knows that Uncle Fitz had passed.
Mhm.
And in talking with Aunt Noreen, which is one of his sisters, and our mom is his other sister, she was sharing with me that before he had transitioned, um, he was asking of her, to free her. Like, I don't want you to be crying and be sad. Like, I'm ready to go. And how our ancestors, grandma, grandpa, and two of our great aunts were sitting on the bed and on his hospital bed, and was saying to him, come on, let's go, we ready. And he was turning to Aunt Noreen and saying, I gotta go, they're waiting for me. And I literally felt, in hearing that I've never felt before, a beauty of and a peacefulness about the transition in death. And I think I've never really sat and thought a lot about it, other than just feeling scared all the time, because that's how we grew up. We grew up, and this societal norms kind of puts it as something to be petrified about, where other cultures, other countries, they embrace it. They have huge celebrations. Even when you go down to Louisiana, death is a very celebrated experience. And that kind of just brought me a level of peace. Lord, no, I don't want to die right now. No, I got some stuff that I would like to do, but I'm beginning to open myself a little bit more to a level of peace that I never thought about before. With death, and you used to do some really strange things people would think is strange, like hanging out and taking dates to cemeteries. Like, and I'm often wondering, like, I never asked, but what were those people thinking? Like, did the dates continue?
Not very long. but in all seriousness, there was this comfort. I think for me, the cemetery is a place where it provided a peacefulness, and it also provided weight to be lifted. That when I'm in a cemetery, it doesn't matter what I'm going through in my life, no matter what stressor, I'm like, well, at the very least, I'm not on the other side of this right now. And there's this way that I'm looking to understand that I am part of all of this process, as tiny as I feel at times in the great big universe, that I'm still a part of that process. Right. And so I think if I've taken dates out there, it's been more like, let's just sit here and reflect. And what do you see? And just walking around, seeing what's on a tombstone. Did people think about that? Or did the family think about it? I want to write something that's going to really symbolize this person's life, not their death, but their life while they lived, And I've spent many times and many days and thinking about quotes and song lyrics that I would love to have on a tombstone, you know,
Yeah.
which for some people is like a morbid thing. Like, I don't want to think about it till the time is. For me, and, you know,
Mhm.
and thankfully because of dad and mom, but really because of dad, I I'm more at peace with the concept of death, you know, and that part was like, I don't know, just
Yeah.
I think I had to come to grips with it, but you know, you know, dad is overboard with it and not realizing that grieving is also a part of it sometimes.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Someone wrote in and said, I found out that death is not final. The spirit of the person lives on. This I know too, Chanita. Oh, death, where is your sting? Like, you're not,
Mhm.
I think so many people really just focus on the physical,
Right.
but that's why our ancestors can come back and sit down on a bed, or mom who is very in tune with the spirit world can dream of those who have gone on,
Mhm.
but their presence is still a part of it
Yeah.
here, and in a positive manner. And that's why we have a niece who is, as young as she is, she's even drawn in certain ways to, I don't want to call it like a morbid thing. I want to find another word for it, but she's drawn to that, the fascination of, this is not scary to me. This is
Right.
embraceable,
Me
you
too,
know?
right. So I've been like that, and it's funny, our niece, Marley, is like
Mhm.
that, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I connect with her on that level, you know, finally found a connection with her, and it happens to be death, right? So this 5-year-old girl and I sitting around looking at my book called On Morbidity, you know, oh,
And having a good time. Y'all are,
like having a good
y'all are
time.
weird.
Yeah.
So uh, there was Veronica made a comment and she says, interesting, you mentioned dates at cemeteries, not the same, but she's taken a group on a tour of a cemetery in New Orleans, which, everybody is buried up top, which is
Right.
really cool in New Orleans because I've been out there too. And she said, and they visit the cemeteries to learn the history of people, the dash between the years. I've heard so many,
Yes, yes,
so many
yes.
ministers preaching on, that dash, making it count, like, because that really is all about what happened between beginning to
Right.
end.
Have
That's what
you
really matters. Mhm.
have you thought about like what saying, hymn, poem,
All the
or
time.
that you would want if you had the power to say, this is what I want on my tombstone? What would one of them be?
Well, I haven't really thought about that so much as I've
Mhm.
thought about, like, lately I've really been thinking about wanting to have a funeral now. Like, I
Mhm.
wanna I wanna experience what people will say. I was sharing with Children of the Gospel this very thing the other day because our theme this year is on surrendering. And, it's been such a we've heard about so many different people who have gone on, and family members and so forth. And it's more than just death and surrendering. But I want to know before I die, like, what are y'all going to say about me? Who, what I really want to know. Oh, she was something else. I really didn't like you. I'm glad you got, but tell me the honest truth because, it's like the same thing about flowers. Let me receive my flowers right now while
Yeah.
I can appreciate them. Let me hear it. And it's not that people don't share those things, but I found myself even feeling funny to even think about wanting to think about having a funeral.
Mm.
I felt that it was like a sense of just weird. But I think about songs all the time. I tell Anise, my goddaughter, I'm like, you have to sing. I'm writing out all the musicians that need to be present because the music, as an artist, music is number one. You already know if the Lord takes me before you got to stand up and speak. I mean, this is just known, and writing it down. But I got to think about that. What are you planning on putting on your
Well, you know, one of
tombstone?
them that always comes back to me is actually the song lyric by this woman named Ani DeFranco. And she
Yeah.
says, they can call me crazy if I fail. All the chance that I need is 1 in a million. Then they can call me brilliant if I succeed. And so I feel like that has captured much of my life, like being like, that's so weird, all my life and so different. And you're crazy. That'll never work that way. And then, if I
That's
fail,
beautiful.
keep on calling that,
Yeah.
And so also part of the whole idea on that tombstone is to really have the idea of like, what was the dash? Like, how did you live? I don't want you just to focus on missing me. I want you to remember how I was on the planet.
Absolutely. That's it too. That's it. May the life that I led be impactful, that you remember that dash. Oh, I got goosebumps when you said that. My dear friend, Chanita, had lost her daughter a few months back, and she made a comment. She said, it took me 2 months to realize that she's healed. It's funny because I say this to people all the time. I think I'm finding it better to pray for God's will. Even when it came with Unc, we want people to stay. I would rather just be like, because God, I know you know what's best. And that is the healing sometimes, that you're not here on this earth enduring pain, and he was in a whole lot of pain. You're not having to worry about, all of that external stuff, the stressors of life. Like you're free.
Right.
You're free from that. And I appreciate that you shared that, Chanita, with us, that you just got a sense of she is healed. ED, it is done. It is done in a good sense. And that she knows now that her other 2 kids and her, everything's going to be all right. Just peaceful with that. I think that, do you find, especially as a psychologist, that those are some of the things that's hard to wrap around in people's thought process, that could be the answer to prayer, that could be God's, I just healed your loved one.
Yeah.
I let them be free. How do you share that with people, that is a part of healing or part of the answer?
Yeah, I think it's a harder conversation. I really do. I think for some people, just any conversation about death only feels the sadness in it for people, And I think one of the things that I try to highlight, even in my humor or storytelling, is the process of transition. That we're always in the mode of transitioning. Like we are hopefully transitioning from a different person we were yesterday into today. How we're going to see something today is going to be very different. And I see death as the same way. Like this is a transition, because we don't know the other side. We become more afraid. Yeah. But it's that thought of like, I think I've been at peace with it, because growing up, I remember when we lived in Bellingham, Massachusetts, and there was this woods that would connect to Cumberland Farms, the store. And there'd be shortcut woods we'd walk through to go through. And it was kind of spooky forest if you're by yourself for a lot of people. They would say, I don't want to go by myself, And I remember every time I'd go by myself, the one thought I would have was, I hope that people will not be afraid of me. And I always identified with that which scared others. And so there was this way that, like looking at death for me was like, okay, I don't want to, it's not like I'm sitting here like, oh, I can't wait to die, but it's more like I'm approaching it. And I know the way I've approached other things in my life with that same attitude of that curiosity of like, okay, like, this is the transition, I'm going to walk this path, I'm really drawn to Native American cultures and how they look at it, and, travel well.
Yeah.
My brother,
Yes. What was that quote that you shared with me the other day?
I was just saying that for Unc, I was just saying when he was suffering, and that's the worst part, like he was suffering. And I was just like, I just wanted to say release, travel well.
Yeah. That just blesses me. I'll be getting lots of goosebumps when I go through a blessing these days. It's wonderful. Why did you think people would be afraid of you? Was it because you're Black and we were living in an all white area?
No.
Why do you think?
I felt like that weird kid. I felt like that kid that was strange. I didn't have any, my friends were all kids who didn't have friends, for the most part. And so it was like,
Wow.
so walking through there, it was just like, are people going to be afraid of me for whatever reason? I wasn't thinking even on a racial level that time. I think it was just, oh man, I hope I don't want people to feel afraid.
That sentence though, I'm a little stuck on. My friends were all people who didn't
had no other
have friends.
friends, right?
Like that.
Mhm.
That's heavy. I'm gonna process that later because there's a lot that's packed into that one sentence. And so you go into these schools and you're doing for those of you who need the quick background, had got your PhD from Rutgers, but the passion of acting has always been infused in us since we were little. You gravitated toward the acting. I was an actor too, but I gravitated more toward the music. You don't remember my Kip the Palace Gremlin thing? I'm gonna look it up for you and find that. And and then here we are not going into, being a doctor full time, but infusing psychology into the acting, which was dynamic. You create your one-man show entitled You Don't Know Me Until You Know Me, which in itself is powerful. Where did that title come from?
Came from the teenage years of making rap, so I was like,
right.
I just remembered there was this line. So like, I was just like, because you really don't know me till you know me. Being black kids in white neighborhoods thought so bad. We're like, yeah.
Oh my God. Michael. Hey. Oh, that hurt my heart. Yeah, no. So here we go. You really don't know me till you know me. So where did the youth come in? Because you could take this really and truly, and I know you have, but you could take this to adults all over the world. How did you gain that passion for the young people?
Yeah. So when we were teens and when I was in my middle teenage years, I remember going with this guy, Ted, from our church and some other people from the church. We would go to the juvenile detention centers and we would have like Bible studies with some of the people who were incarcerated. And there was this passion about connecting with people who have been judged and misunderstood for all their lives, right? So there was this way that wanting people just to be seen and not just be seen because they messed up or they had a part of their life that was real rocky or they did something that was real serious and damaging to other people, but to know that there's a human being still there. There's that human being that I've always fought to try to say that I want to see that person. That's what I want to see,
Yeah.
And I don't know someone just because they've done a bunch of actions, whether positive or negative.
How many Black schools have you been into with this message? And then how has the reception been, compare and contrast the reception between the predominantly white schools and the predominantly Black schools? I'm going somewhere with this, y'all.
Yeah. So with predominantly Black schools, what I feel like there's this layer that I have to get through first. That layer is a survival layer, who is this person coming in? Are they safe? On a very basic level, it's like, can I trust what this person's saying? And then there's this other level that's playing with the Black males, like the level of respect. Like, why should I respect you when you haven't earned it? And you're like, I'm not going to. And so there's this tension that builds in there. And I used to be very frustrated doing presentations in all Black or mostly Black schools because the resistance that I would feel would be very out there, very intense in your face, and so I had to learn, like one of the things that I learned in the process of doing these presentations is that it's not these other people that have to change to adjust to me. It's me who has to adjust to them. And that was something that I didn't I didn't have it at first. Like, I think I would just walk away from schools, like certain urban schools, and feel very frustrated that I can go into an urban school that was 98% Latino, Hispanic, and very different reception. Some of the
Yeah,
best
yeah,
receptions, embracing me, like, but then going into a school that was mostly Black, and it's like, what was accepted as behavior for me was not acceptable to me as a presenter performer.
right, right.
And
Do you think that had we been brought up in the influences, okay, because we were born in New York, we lived there for a short period of time and then moved to an all white area. And that was really our formative years of being in Massachusetts and then going to New Jersey for the high school years. Do you think that that has an effect on the relationship or how to relate walking in? If we had been in a different environment, would you automatically know, hey, okay, I got this. I understand this energy. Or that doesn't presuppose, or shouldn't presuppose, that you don't understand the energy because you're a Black man, period.
right, right. I don't think that. I think me as an artist, it's more like it's a little bit more of an exposure thing, right? So one of the things I would love to do is to go into a lot more schools to say, how can we set up a structure where these kids get to experience an off-Broadway show, a Broadway show,
Hmm.
something where they're not just stuck with a limited view of these other ways that people communicate and connect with each other.
Absolutely.
I don't think it would have been that. It would have been still a frustration part, because I watch teachers in these schools and they're still
Hmm.
frustrated.
Hmm.
They're still
Absolutely.
very frustrated with it. But when I watched The Matrix again, and it was really one of these things, I watched the movie The Matrix so many times that what I look for now is different. But one of the things that the message for me was during this one scene where Keanu Reeves bending the spoon, or Keanu Reeves waiting to see the Oracle, and this little
Right.
boy is bending the spoon, and the little boy hands him the spoon and says,
Go
"Try it."
ahead.
So he's looking at the spoon, and the little boy is like, "Don't try to bend the spoon with your mind. That's impossible. Rather just remember the truth." And he's like, "The truth?" And he's like, "Yeah, there is no spoon, but it is your mind that must bend first, and then the spoon will follow."
Ah, ooh,
Right?
okay. I
And
know I've
it's
seen The Matrix a million times, but
right.
that hit me different.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when I started going into schools after that were Black urban schools, I was like, well, just because I start off in these other schools, this one way of being like, let me share a story with you, and they receive it,
Yeah.
maybe I have to do something. I'm the one that has to change, not the spoon, that
Yeah.
I'm the one that has to. So I started going out. And then what I started doing was, like, I would start off with a spoken word piece. You know what I mean? I'd be
Hmm.
like, 911, I got an emergency. 911, can you hear me? And 911 must have been dialed 100,000 times on that day when we got played and tall buildings came crashing down to that terrible but terrific silence of sound. And there was no one around to answer the calls because darkness was rising like ashes that fall. And so we all scattered to hide behind imaginary walls of fear. 911, I got an emergency. 911, what is your emergency? Fear is gripping me. And the real irony, the people who were early for work that day got worked that day without the pay. The people who were late were right on time to see planes and bodies exploding like nursery rhymes. Rockabye baby on the treetop. And just like when the bow breaks, if you jump from a burning building, oh baby, you do drop. And pop goes the weasel. And I'd go on like this, right? And
Wow.
so I'd hit them, and all of a sudden, I'm having people do this,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And so it's all about, it's like the pacing of it, right? So it's a pacing, like, how do you bend so that you'll see what's in front of you bending with you,
Yeah. That's such an artist thing. I'm hoping that there are a lot of artists who are online right now, and that will come back and listen to you saying that, learning how to bend, because the very first thing that we do need to do is be in touch with our audience.
Mhm.
And our audience changes every single time we have a performance. And so we never have the opportunity, or we should never feel comfortable to want to do it the same way. But
Right.
learning how to, and that's the beauty of being called a creative and being called
Mm.
into creativity, is that we get that opportunity in that moment to see, okay, now how am I going to maneuver and work this environment? These are different people. And I love that. I love what you said about that. And I'm going to be preaching that very same thing to, my students who are coming up and want to embrace this thing, and they are petrified with fear. By the way, who wrote that poem right there? You?
Me. Yeah.
Oh! You should have finished it. That was, you saw me. I was moving forward too, because
Right,
that
right.
thing right there was incredible. That was powerful. One of the things that I find myself thinking a lot about, Mike, are is really where we are today. I'm very called to the youth.
Mm.
God has given me a
Mhm.
calling to the youth, but I don't want us to ever negate the fact that we're all human beings, and we're all trying to go through this journey all at these different spaces. But the one thing that I have seen that has tremendously risen out of the pandemic is this level of depression.
Yes.
And sometimes there are two things for me: identifying it for oneself, and even identifying it for our loved ones. And how do we help? What can we do to um, you know to talk about it some more, to reach out, to just be aware? Because sometimes, like I discovered for myself, I was sharing with you the other day, I know that when I went through a very, very rough breakup, that I was just a high functioning depressed
Mm.
person. It was, and it manifested really and truly out on myself of being angry with me, like feeling like I was duped again, and going into these spaces that when I came home, I would just want to lay down and sleep. I would be so angry. I mean, it was just a lot of stuff, but I didn't know that until after I got through it,
Yeah.
So what do we do?
I think part of it is taking from our own experiences what helped us to get through that experience of depression, of anxiety, right? So one of the things that I feel like I do a pretty good job at is that I make myself vulnerable and sharing the things that make most people afraid to talk about,
Hmm.
because they may want to exist in a space of I want I want that happy ending. I want that good story. I want to
Hmm.
feel just good. And so when I've been going into schools now and talking about the pandemic, one of the things I'll say is that congratulations, you're still here, like to the students.
All
But
right.
I don't say with any like with really, because you hear some laughter with it, but I'm like, yo, you don't understand. This has never happened to anyone right now who is alive. And
Mm,
what you students have that I've never had, my parents never had, their parents never had, is that when I used to complain growing up, when my siblings and my friends complain about, oh man, I'm in depression, and our parents look at us with a smirk and be like, oh, you think you have a tough life? You want to know what it was like
right.
for me back in Jamaica? And this
Right.
idea that, yeah, parents always had it worse. And then, they talk to their parents, and of course their grandparents, walked uphill both ways, all that kind of laughter about it. But for the first time, I say to the students, you realize now when you start getting upset and your parents like, you think you have a tough life? When I was growing up, and you can look at them and say, no, stop, mom, dad, when I'm growing up right now,
Yeah.
you never experienced
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
teenage years,
Yeah.
that disconnect, the idea that some parents kept their children away from even their best friends or their other
Mm.
family members
Yeah.
for the better part of 2 years. Like, and I say this to teachers and staff, like, You want to know why there's so many? I've been going to a lot of schools where there's been so many more fights now than there ever has been.
Yep.
I went to a school in New Hampshire where they hadn't had a fight since 1993.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah. And this year they've had 5. And so what I said to the students, I said, do you know why that's happening? Because you haven't been able to touch each other. Yeah. And I don't mean in some perverse way. I mean, we need physical contact with each other. So if we can't get good touch, we're going to get bad touch.
Wow. That's kind of deep though, dude. Like some people won't be able to necessarily receive, like, how do you equate, these kids going out here and fighting one another just because they want to be touched? How are you really justifying that?
Because if you listen to how the fights are happening in many of these places, it comes from things that normally wouldn't have turned into fights. Someone's horsing around, like slap someone in the head, like kind of like slap boxing stuff, or like poking to see if that's going to irritate someone enough where the person doesn't have the frustration tolerance anymore. So they just snap. And it's not just kids, it's the adults, right? I used to like flash my high beams on someone that cuts me off in traffic. I don't do that anymore because I'm not sure if that next person is going to pull off and open fire.
People are just that volatile now, just that. And I'm recognizing like the smallest amount of things that you're right that are causing people to just literally snap. So what can people do? Self-care is a word that is being thrown around a lot. And self-care is, I think we have a misperception as to what that is. A lot of women think that, if I go and get my nails done and my hair done and I get a massage, that's self-care. I believe that it's a part of it, but it's deeper than that too. It's self. It's what am I doing to take care of my mind? What am I doing to take care of my spirit? Not just the physical on it too. What are things, especially for men, that in this time that we're slowly climbing out of this pandemic, we'll always have it around, but what are things that men can do, Black men can do, Black women, anybody can do to take care of their overall health and well-being, but really starting with the mind?
Right. So I think one of the things that I've noticed when I'm doing presentations, regardless of the school, is asking people to get in touch with their story. And not only get in touch with their story, but find ways to start sharing those pieces of the story. So the best way to share parts of your story is to start at a younger age. So I asked the question of, talk about an experience that makes you feel sad, embarrassed, or good that happened in your life between ages 4 and 10. Right. And what starts to happen when I ask that question is people feel open enough to share a story that removed from their lives right now.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, it's safe. And they don't realize it's actually very telling what's happening, So they'll share a story about feeling embarrassed about something. And then one of the things I've noticed when I've asked that in groups is that when people share a story, that they'll share a story they think is so unique that they're the only ones going through it. And then when they see the reaction by people around them, they realize they're not as alone. So a quick one like this is to I say to any group, whether it's an all Black school, a mixed school, a white school, Asian school, I say, how many of you ever walked up to an adult when you were younger thinking they were your mom or your dad and called them mom or dad? And I never knew it was a common story until I asked that question. And all these hands raise up and people are laughing like I did that. And it's like this chuckle of embarrassment, but also like, wow, you've been through that as well.
Have you been through that?
I've never done that. No.
Okay, no, because I was like, yo, dude, we didn't have any confusion with who our mother was when we were coming up.
No.
We could always point them out. But what would you share if they asked you, hey, Dr. Mykee, what about you?
Yeah. So actually one of the stories that I do share is like the whole idea that I hated the summer growing up. Right. And I always would talk about it. Like, I just hate the summer. I hate the heat, and it was always like, it makes me hot and sweaty and I couldn't stand it. And then, I'm like, I just thought, that I enjoy going to Minnesota and Alaska because it's cooler weather and it makes me feel comfortable. And then 4 years ago, watching this play in New York City called Schoolgirls. It's like it takes place in some unnamed country in Africa, all girls school. Beauty pageants are going to happen. The beauty pageant instructor, she's pointing to certain girls who are not allowed to compete. And at one point, these girls are like, are we unattractive? Are we not pretty? Like, why can't we compete? And she's like,
Right.
oh, no, you're all beautiful. But there's never been a winner in Africa or the world in a beauty pageant that's ever had a skin tone as dark or darker than you girls.
Wow.
And when I looked at these girls, like some of their skin tones are lighter, some were as dark and some were darker. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting in New York City and I start crying.
Wow.
And I remember being 8 years old living in Waltham, and that my skin is darker than growing up, darker than mom, yours, and Roy's. And mom would pull me aside and be like, Mykee, don't be out in the sun very long today. It's hot outside. You're going to get black, and then you're going to be ugly.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I've taken that story and internalized it. That's a story of an 8-year-old kid. But that 8-year-old kid still during the summertime now
hates the sun. Yeah, oh no, I know. Joy and I were talking about this the other day, as we're thinking of, wanting to plan a family trip. And I asked you about it. I was laughing with her because I was like, Mike was like, oh, I ain't going out there. It's hot. It's the sun. And though now that you're saying this and you've talked about this with me before, it's amazing how, those words have just lived with you all of this time. And have you ever attempted to move past that?
Yeah, so that play was the part that helped me to start moving past that. So being conscious of it helps me not to believe in the messaging anymore. Where the summer rolls around and I can still be like, oh, it's disgusting, but it's going to be because I don't want to feel sweaty. And it's not going to be tied into this other part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the very least, I'm now cognizant of that other part. That other part is still, it's still there. It's still there. Like I was sharing at a school. I was at the school in New Jersey. I won't name the school, but it's mostly students who are white, Caucasian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a security booth, they have security camera, and they need to print out badges for people so that you could be recognized in the school if you're a visitor. So they take this picture of me.
Saw the picture.
Yeah. And it's a black blob. I'm like, how are you recognizing me if I'm walking around the school with this picture?
They're recognizing you because you one of the very few black people in the school.
But something like that, I could laugh about it now, but I don't know. Like prior to seeing that play, like there was this embarrassment of like, oh, I don't want this thing. I'll throw it out quickly, you know? But now it's like I put it on my bag and I joke around about it. And that's the thing about humor. One of the things that I try to also help people with their depression, with getting to know themselves is how can you look at your story from a different angle? Do not just get stuck with the angle that people said that you have to view that story. That no story in and of themselves is just sad, just happy, just good, just or they're positive.
Well, suppose they're the ones that are telling themselves this narrative. I like on a very small level, I'll get students who I'll say, hey, you want to be in the choir? Oh, no, I can't sing. Who told you couldn't sing? I did. So what do you do to help the person who has given themselves all of the doubt? Nobody else has, just them.
Yeah, no, that is a hard part. I went juggling. I have a friend, Sandra, who's she juggles as one of the things that she does, and she had invited me to come to this elementary school where every Tuesday night people juggle there, and you have people who are experts and you have people who are novices who have never juggled at all, like myself. And it was a very frustrating thing to watch juggle. And I had to shut my mind off because I kept saying everything negative, like, oh man, stop being so stiff here. Come on, throw this there. And I heard myself talk. But one of the things about the juggling community, which has become this metaphor for me in the way that we need to interact with each other, is that this juggling community really realizes that doesn't matter what your expertise level is, that you're going to have to fail in juggling in order to keep on advancing. Like
Mm,
the
mhm.
balls have to drop. It has to drop at some point if you
Yeah.
want to get to that next level. Right. And so every time I like drop a ball and I'd be focusing on the fact I dropped the ball, other jugglers who have been juggling look around and go, "Oh man, that was really great. That arc of where you threw that ball, you used your other hand to throw that ball up,
I
that was
love it.
perfect."
I
You know?
love it. I
And
love it.
but that's not, but you know what it is that gets stuck for me is that most of my learning has come by way of people yelling at me, whether it was my coaches in football or in high school grabbing me by my face mask and going, "What's wrong with you, Fowlin?" And
Yeah.
yelling at me, or dad,
Yeah.
asking him a math problem and him being excited about sharing math, but how it came across as like, "Why are you yelling at me?"
And he was definitely yelling.
Oh, he was.
Right,
He,
right,
he
right.
just got
But it's
excited.
amazing that, we normalized it. Like,
Yeah,
even if friends had come over and they would stand in the driveway and hear dad, would be like, no, he's not mad. That's normal voice. Like you start to, say that's normal versus we know the difference of when he's actually on 1000 about something. And I find myself though doing the same things. That's a great analogy of the juggling. I find myself though, in even expressing with students at school, that sometimes I get to a height of frustration that they're not going to get it because you yelling. You
right,
know what I'm saying? They might get quiet. They might be like, oh, she about to explode, but they're not really going to get it because you're young. They actually shut down. And so I'm learning how to be more conscious of it in the moment and to stop myself before I get to that space to know that they're going to fall, they're going to fail, and it's
right.
okay.
But
You're
that one,
there. Hmm.
yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but that one student that you're talking about, I think one of the things that I learned for myself with the juggling, and I shared this right after my experience of juggling with some of the audiences, that I said, you know what I learned from juggling? It wasn't anything about juggling because I suck at juggling. You know
Hmm.
what I learned from juggling though is that I am not good at being kind to myself.
Yeah.
And so my lesson that I learned is to go easier on myself. And that is what I think when I see a person beat themselves up, it's like, oh no, that's an easy thing to do. We all can do that, beat
Yep.
ourselves up. And then I share the story of the juggling because it's like, hey, I learned that my learning can still happen if I'm going easy on myself.
Yeah. Period. As a matter of fact,
Yeah,
maybe even better
yeah,
when I'm going easy on
absolutely.
myself. I learned that in a coaching session. I still take coaching with a vocal instructor. And I'm one of those people that when I'm learning something, I want to get it. I'd like,
Yeah.
if I'm not getting it by time number 3, I'm really like, ooh, and I'll do that a lot. And she's like, Michelle, be kind. Be kind to
Mm,
yourself. All the time, it's this reminder, not be kind to yourself. And I see myself doing it with students who do the same level of frustration on themselves about being kind. Love yourself. I think that's a part of self care. What other thing can you drop in about self care? What do you do, Mike? For self-care, where do you go? What's inspiring you when you have to come up with new elements in your show? Where are you going for this?
I listen to the stories that are around me. That's my best way that I've come up with stories or things that I'm sharing in my shows is that I just like the juggling thing. Like,
Yeah.
no, you know what I mean? Like the juggling thing was something where I literally went to juggle, but the lesson I walked away with was that I need to be kinder to myself. And I think one of the things that I've learned to do and become very attuned to understand or do is that I want to see beyond what the thing actually is. So one of the
Yeah.
ways I take care of myself is that getting in a place where I can think like, okay, how can I become creative in this moment? What can I do that just is a little bit outside? I'm going to write this poem on a piece of toilet paper. I'm going to take postcards and stick it into books in the library or in the bookstore. Right. So like those things for me uh, are just like those simple ways of either making myself laugh or feel embracing my creativity. That's
Hmm.
how I do the self-care, like challenging myself a little bit outside of my comfort zone is something that I've been trying to do. Like I watched this movie that was in French. The subtitles were Dutch only, and I don't speak either language, right? So I wanted to see, can I comprehend what I am seeing? Do we communicate beyond our words, you know?
Yeah,
And then
that's
like
good.
then I had watched it again when there was the English subtitled version, and
Different
it was,
story.
no, there were things
Oh,
I missed,
wow.
but I was shocked because I had gotten the majority of it because I was paying attention to our human way we communicate,
Wow.
which transcends language, right? And that's the part, that how do we
Yeah.
transcend language, transcend color? How do we
Yeah.
transcend these parts where, going back to what I shared in the first time in our first round of like the temperature in our Japanese teacup, right? How do
Yeah.
we know each other for our stories, rather than just a handle, so to speak.
That is you. That is who you are. This, I called you a humanitarian at the top of the show, but like literally it is, you really are always trying to find that connection between any human being and the
Yeah.
beauty, and celebrating the beauties of our similarities and our differences,
Yeah.
not allowing the differences to be like it's a fault. But I really love and appreciate that about you, Mike. And I'm striving to be better in that area. Um, but it is a calling. It is a gift. That's like it's
Right.
a gift, and the creator definitely has blessed you with that for all of the experiences that you've had in your life. It's shaping who you are today and what you go out and you preach and you minister about. And I don't mean like the actual preacher in a pulpit, for those who might think that. I'm talking about your spoken word, your heart, sharing your stories with other people. There are people in this world who are trying to heal and are healing, the ing, in the process of racial discrimination, sexual discrimination, political, financial, just all these different things. Have dealt with people who have committed suicide. They think of suicide themselves. They have dealt with death. They have, I mean, there's just a plethora, a
Mhm.
list of on and on and on. What can you share with them, especially with the young people who might be listening, that can help them in their healing process?
Yeah, I think one of the messages, you are not alone. And as simple as that sounds, I mean, I remember Mrs. Blake from my sophomore year of high school, my English teacher. And what she did was that, and the other part is to observe, right? So
Hmm.
Mrs. Blake was an observer, that she wasn't fooled by my grades. I was an A student in her class, but she would go down to the cafeteria every day and stand against the wall, and she would observe the students who were eating in the cafeteria, and she paid attention to the students who ate lunch alone. And I was always one of them. And so what the power of that observation for me was like, wow, she saw me in my sadness, that I feel alone, but she was like, you are not alone, And that's the first message. The other part is go easy on yourself. But
Yeah.
then the third message that I would say that I try to pass on to people and I try to live within myself is to don't be afraid of what's behind all of that mask or that clothing, so to speak. I think, to tie it back to what I had said at the beginning, when I was screaming about Rosemary and, seeing me naked underneath the bed, I had to choose like how that will never happen again. I don't want that to happen again. And so it turned into this almost like this spiritual, emotional part later in my teenage years and college of like, I'm going to let people see me for who I am, my weird self as it may be. They need to see that person. And I got so frustrated one day in a psychology, human sexuality class, and we're talking about sexuality under the Christian framework.
Hmm.
And I was sharing my own ideas and did not go along with the traditional Christian viewpoint.
Sure. Hmm.
And these people attacked me in the class. I mean, berated me. I was angry to the point of just crying, Like, so
Yeah.
after the class, I go to the professor and I'm like, Jim, I feel attacked. I feel judged. I didn't do anything. I'm just sharing like my opinion. And he goes, Mike, I want to tell you something that may help you. He's like, you're bolder than me. He's like, you speak your truth.
Mm.
And that scares most people.
Yeah.
And when you do that, though, understand that you're going to have many people come at you.
Yep. Yep.
And
yep.
you know what? You can't have it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah, yeah.
Wow, you know, but it was just like, embrace the fact, instead of crying underneath that bed, you come out of that bed and say, yep, I just got out of the shower.
I like that. I just got out the shower. Yeah, that's great. What a great point.
Yeah.
What a great point. I look at the time and I'm always like, you know, with you and I, with everybody, there's just so many awesome things to talk about. I appreciate your time. I know there are lots of nuggets. I was writing it down, the things that I can go back and I can digest. And of course, I'm going to look at the show again and hear and experience some more things. But you are an amazing gem on this earth. And I
So are you, sis. So are
appreciate,
you,
yeah.
sis. I
Thank
love
you,
you.
bro. I love you too. I love
Yeah.
you deeply.
You have the ability to challenge me to take down some of those layers too. You know, you're very authentic as a human being, and you know, and that is going to butt heads with people at times, but that part I admire, because that is your truth and how you walk the planet. You know.
Thank you. I'm gonna say my brother told me that I should be.
Yeah. Talk to you, boys.
Muses, thank you so very much for being a part of the show. I hope that you too were able to receive something, if not many things, things that you can do in your own journey for healthcare, for great mental health and well-being, and to share the love with other people. We are in this thing together. No matter what we think, all the differences that we have, we are in this journey together. And the core of how we move about this earth has to be through love. So without further ado, until we see each other the next time, remember, you are loved. I love you. And go love on somebody else. Peace and blessings.